Welcome. This is validworks. Validworks is a decentralized marketplace for freelance services built on the Elrond blockchain. This is our demo submission for the Moralis Hackathon. So let's get started. Existing centralized platforms take a huge cut on transaction volume. May not give sellers the flexibility in pricing their own gigs, and they always 100% side the buyer because they bring the business and ultimately allow these platforms to profit. On validworks, buyers are required to lock an amount of the price of the gig plus an additional 20% of that price as a deposit to our smart contract. If the buyer accepts the seller's delivery, the buyer is returned the deposit and the seller gets paid. If the buyer, however, disputes the delivery, the buyer loses the deposit but gets refunded in the price of the gig. As such, buyers are disincentivized from making false disputes even when the seller has delivered satisfactory work. Our smart contract also enforces the deadlines. As you will see in the demo, when the seller lists a gig, the seller has to provide an expected delivery time, which will be used to calculate a delivery deadline when a buyer places an order. If the seller does not meet this deadline, the seller cannot get paid, and the buyer gets a full refund inclusive of the deposit. When the seller has delivered, the buyer has 3 days to act on the delivery, that is whether or not to accept or dispute, else the seller gets paid regardless. This protects both buyers and sellers when the other party in the deal is inactive.
Our website deeply integrates with Moralis as the backend. Our user authentication leverages on the authentication API provided by Moralis. Furthermore, all of the gig listing details are stored on Moralis backend server. The IPFS integration within Moralis also makes uploading of the thumbnails for the gig a breeze. Now we will proceed to do a roleplay walkthrough of a typical deal on validworks.
I'm Gordon, the buyer.
And I'm Desmond, the seller. Okay, so this is the first page you'll see when you visit validworks. For MVP, we have a basic bare bones design with just the explore carousel, here where you can view all the gigs posted on the website. Of course, in the future, we plan to have a search feature so that you can search gigs by their name. Also, we will fill up this space with banners etc. to explain how to deal with our platform. But just for this demo, we are going to assume that the seller already knows how the platform works. Okay, so now I'm going to proceed to click Wallet Connect to do an Elrond authentication using Moralis. I already have my ledger set up, so I'll verify my address on my ledger. Okay, I'm successfully logged in. Because it's my first time on the platform, it's asking me for my email address. I'll go ahead and enter my email address here. For MVP, we did not build a chat feature on our platform. So as a workaround, we are having users communicate using email. But we recognize that this is not ideal or safe and will definitely build a chat right into our platform before we launch. As you can see now that I'm logged in, the page has changed slightly. As a seller, I'm going to click Create Gig. For MVP, you have to give the price in eGold, but in the future, we plan to use fiat values and handle the conversion behind the scenes. Okay, before I click Create, I will need to come back up here and click Ledger Login to verify my address on my ledger again. So the Create button will list your gig on-chain, which will require a contract call. Previously when I did this, it was to authenticate using Moralis and log into my user account on the Moralis backend. But if I want to make contract calls, I will need to do this again with this button in order to initialize things on Elrond's end. Alright, now that I've done that, I can go ahead and click List Gig. The transaction pops up again on my ledger to ask me to sign the transaction. Once I approve it, there will be a loading animation. This will take about 5 to 10 seconds on Elrond's testnet. When it's done, I can preview my gig listing. Okay, now that my gig is listed, I can click on this ID to view the listing transaction on the Explorer. As you can see, my gig has been successfully listed on the Elrond testnet. Here, there's an Unlist button that will remove my gig from the chain. Finally, if I go back to the first page, I can see my gig under my gigs. Alright, now I'll just have to wait for a buyer.
Okay, I'm back. I want to get help with printing Hello World to my terminal, so I'm on ValidWorks. I'm already logged in. In the Explore carousel, I found the gig I'm looking for, so I can click on it to view the details. Here I can see the seller's email address, so I'll go ahead and email him to clarify the job scope. Once again, for the MVP, we are using email, but we do plan on building a chat into the platform. Okay, now I've ironed out the details with the seller, I can go ahead and place an order. So I'll click Ledger Login, verify my address, and click Order. When it's done, I get a confirmation pop-up and I can view my transaction on the Testnet Explorer. As mentioned, the amount that was shown on my ledger and over here is 1.2 times the price of the gig, which is in this case 1.2 ego. When we actually launch, we will make this disparity clear on the UI for sure. Okay, it's done. Notice the order status of the gig has also changed to in order. Down here, you can see 3 buttons: refund, dispute, and accept. For our MVP, we are putting all the buttons here out of convenience, but on launch, we will only show the ones that are actually available at a more particular stage of a deal. Anyways, even for now, if you click a button that you weren't supposed to at the wrong time, like accept when the seller hasn't delivered, the smart contract will return an error. Oh, and our final product will also reflect the deadline, which is 7 days from today or the day I make this order. If I click back to the first page, I can see my order under my orders. Great. Now I'll just leave the seller to work on my script. Oh yeah, and I probably should also tell the seller that I just made an order. So I'll write him an email. All right.
20 minutes later.
I have just received an email from a potential buyer. Let me just write him a reply. Okay, I'm done with the order. Let me just send it back to Gordon. Now, I just need to go back on to ValidWorks. Click on Deliver and sign the transaction. After the buyer accepts, I will be able to claim the payment. Our final product will show the deadline for when the buyer must act on the delivery, which will be 3 days from today or the day when I have delivered. Here we can see that our transaction has been successfully listed on the blockchain.
20 minutes later.
Yay, I received a reply. All right, let me download the file to check if it works. Hopefully it does. And it works. On ValidWorks, I'll click accept. If I click here to view the transaction on the Explorer, I can verify that my 20% deposit of 0.2 Ego has indeed been refunded to my address. In the future, we will also be building an off-chain feedback system leveraging Moralis' backend so that I'll be able to recommend this seller to other buyers looking for a Hello World script. I'll email the seller to say I've already accepted. Alright, now the seller can go and claim his payment.
Yay! My delivery got accepted. I'll go ahead and click claim. Here on the devnet Explorer, you can see that I've got my payment successfully. The order status on validworks will also be back to open. So I'm ready to receive more orders. But I think I'll take a break for now, so I'll unlist my gig. If I click Unlist and approve on my ledger, I'll be sent back to the first page. And as you can see, my gig is no longer here. Okay, now we will go through a scenario in which the buyer disputes the order after the seller has delivered.
I just got a reply from the seller. He sent me a Java file, even though his description said it would be a Python file, and that's what I'm looking for. Let me contact the seller to fix it. Please note, at this point during the demo, the Elrond testnet has been made unavailable as it's being stress tested. As such, we had to redeploy it on the devnet. Hence, for the following scenario, you will see the devnet Explorer being used instead. What? Okay, I'm going to dispute this. I'll go back to validworks and click dispute. Then I'll sign the transaction. On the Explorer, you'll see I'll only get refunded in the price of the gig, and my deposit is withheld. When we have our feedback system up, I'll also be able to leave a negative review with this seller. Notice the gig status is back to open as my deal has been closed. Okay, that's it for our demo. If you'd like to try this out for yourself, you may follow the instructions here. Please take note that we are deployed on the devnet. As we have mentioned along the way in this presentation, we plan on building these features moving forward. Thank you.